to Create Kids. Today we are going to talk about one of the miracles that Jesus performed. It is about a man who was blind from the time he was born. And what we're going to learn from that is that God is always in control. The verse we're going to be learning from is John 9, verse 3, and it says, "It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins," Jesus answered. "This happened so the power of God could be seen in him." And we'll learn what that means in a few minutes when we get to the story. But what I want you to just remember for now is that God is always in control. And it's important to have faith when things that aren't the best happen, because God is going to take care of it all. He knows what he's doing. He's smart, right? He knows everything that is going to happen. It's happened in the past, and he knows how it's all going to come together. So we just have to remember that everything is going to work out for our good, right? So one day, Jesus and the disciples were walking along the road, and they see this man begging. And, if you're blind, you can't work because you can't see. So the only thing you can do is ask people for money, and hopefully people will be nice enough to give you some. So that's what he was doing. And the disciples look at Jesus and they're like, "Hey, Jesus, what did this guy do wrong? Why is he blind? Did he sin before he was born?" And then some of the other ones were like, "Well, maybe it was his parents. What did his parents do? His parents must have sinned if he's blind because, there has to be some reason for it, right?" And Jesus responded that it was so the power of God could be shown. It wasn't because anybody did anything wrong. It wasn't because his parents made a mistake. It was just so this moment could come and God could display his power through Jesus. Because God can use anything he wants to show people who he is. So then Jesus said that we must carry out quickly the tasks assigned by the one who sent us, which, he was saying that when situations like this happen, we have to move fast. We can't just sit around and wait. And what God wanted Jesus to do in that moment was heal this blind man. And if Jesus would have waited, he would have missed an opportunity for God to display his power. And the same things happen with us. Sometimes God will say, "Hey, go talk to that girl over there because she looks really lonely." And you could be like, "I don't know her like that. I don't want to go talk to her." And then you miss the opportunity to show that girl that looks lonely and sad who God is through your kindness. Okay? So when God tells you to do something, it's really important to move in that moment, to do what he says when he says to do it, because there's a reason why he's asking us. Just like there was a reason why Jesus and the disciples ran into this blind man on the road. Now, Jesus also said that there is a time coming when no one will be able to work. And he was talking about himself. He knew that he was coming towards the end of his life when he was going to die. And he knew that he needed to do something for this man. And the same thing happens with us. Everybody doesn't live forever. We all know that at some point we're all going to die. So we can't wait to do the work of God, right? We have to start doing things as soon as he tells us, because at some point we're not going to be able to do the work anymore. And what if you wait your whole life and you never do what God tells you to do? What happens? People miss out on what you were supposed to do. Just like for me, I do this YouTube channel so that you guys can learn about the Bible. But if I waited and I said, God, I just don't want to be on camera. I don't think that's a good idea. You guys wouldn't be getting these lessons, and you guys would be missing out on learning the Bible. So I was obedient, even though I was a little bit scared to be on camera, just like you have to be obedient when God tells you to do something. Now, after Jesus said all these things to the disciples, guess what he did? You're never going to guess it. It's a little bit gross. They didn't have sidewalks like we have now with pavement. They all walked on dirt. That's all they really had back then, right? So Jesus spit on the ground And then he started swirling his little finger around in it, and he made mud. And then he picked that mud up and he wiped it on the blind man's eyes. That's a little gross, right? I agree. I think it's nasty. But again, we have to have faith. Things aren't always going to be pretty. Sometimes really good things are going to start out ugly. And this was one of those things. In the end, the man was going to be able to see, and he had never seen anything in his entire life. He never saw a rainbow. He never saw what his parents looked like. He didn't know what he looked like. He didn't know what the color blue was because he was blind. So this ugly thing, this mud and spit on his face, was going to turn into one of the most beautiful things that would ever happen to him. He would get his sight. But what if the man was like, no, Jesus, I just heard you spit and I can hear everybody around me talking about what you're doing right now. You're about to put that spit mud on my face? No, thank you. If he would have said, no, don't do it, he would have never gotten his sight. He had to let it happen. He had to trust God. So Jesus did that. He spit, made the mud, put it on the guy's eyes, and he said, go to the pool of Siloam. And that's just one of the pools back then that was near where they were. And he said, go wash your face. So the guy went and he washed his face. But what if the guy got the mud on his eyes, but then he didn't wash his face? What if he just didn't listen to Jesus and he just kept on sitting there? He would have never gotten his sight. That's why it's so important that when Jesus tells us to do something, we have to do it. I have no idea what's going to come of this YouTube channel, but, Jesus told me to start this YouTube channel, so I did. Maybe one day I'll be famous. Maybe one day I won't. I don't know, but if I didn't listen and just start it right now, I'd never get the chance to find out. So it was important for that guy, the blind man, to listen to what Jesus said, to go wash his face. Everybody was probably like, what? This is so weird. Because nothing like that had ever been done before. So he does it and he comes back able to see. He was so excited. And everybody that was around that knew him, they're like, wait a minute. Isn't that the blind beggar? Isn't that the guy that was sitting on the side of the road asking us for money the other day? Now he can see? Oh my gosh. And some people were like, no, that can't be him. That has to be somebody that looks like him. And so all the people in the town started going back and forth, and they're like, Who is that guy? Is it him? Is it? I don't know. It looks like him, but I don't know. And he was like, guys, it's me. I'm the blind guy. I can see you. And he's super, super excited. And everybody was shocked. But the thing is, Jesus healed him on the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath for them was like Sunday for us. On Sundays, we always go to church, right? And for Jewish people, their Sabbath was like their Sunday. That's the day that they worship God. And on the Sabbath, they were not allowed to work. So when these people started finding out that Jesus healed this man on their Sabbath, on the day that they weren't supposed to work, they were like, ooh. So they go to the Pharisees, who were like the Jewish religious leaders back then. They're the ones that are in charge of the synagogues, which are like the churches for Jewish people, because everybody were Jews back then. And they're talking to the Pharisees and they're like, hey, Jesus healed this guy on the Sabbath. So they start asking him all these questions and they're like, bro, what happened? Like, let us know who did this, blah, blah, blah. And so the blind man tells them everything. They're like, yeah, this guy Jesus came and he spit on the ground and he made the mud and he put it on my eyes and told me to go wash it off and now I can see. And the Pharisees were upset because they thought that Jesus broke one of their really important rules, which was not to work on the Sabbath. Because for Jewish people back then, they had to follow these set of rules that were really important to them. If you broke the rules, that was really, really bad back then. So they keep asking, and they keep asking them all these questions, trying to figure out what's going on and how this happened and why it happened. And then they start arguing. And some of the Pharisees are like, well, this man can't be from God because he would never break the rules. And other people were like, but wait a minute. If he wasn't from God, he would not have been able to heal this man. We know for a fact he was blind. So something major had to happen. So they keep questioning him. They're like, I mean, come on, there has to be something you're not telling us. Give us more details. And the guy is like, I told you what happened. Then they go and get his parents. And they're like, Mom, Dad, come in. Let's chat. Let's talk. So they're talking to his mom and his dad. And they're like, was he blind from birth? And they're like, yeah, he was. And they're like, well, how did this happen? And the mom and dad are like, you know what? He is old enough to speak for himself. So we're gonna go home. If you have questions, ask him, because he can speak for himself. So his parents leave, and then the Pharisees start asking him more and more questions. Like, they just won't stop. And the man is like, come on, I told you what happened. And then he was like, do you guys want to be a follower of Jesus? Do you want to be his disciple? And the Pharisees get super, super mad. They're like really, really offended now. They're upset. And they're like, well, Jesus must be a sinner because he broke the rules. And the man was like, look, I don't know whether he's a sinner or not, but I know what I know. And what I know is I was blind and now I can see. So the Pharisees wanted to ignore the fact that he could see now because a miracle happened and just focus on like who Jesus was and where he came from. And that's not what was important in that moment. What was important is that the power of God was displayed. That's major. That's what they should have been focused on, is the fact that God did something amazing through Jesus. But they didn't care about what God did. They just wanted to figure out who Jesus was, because if Jesus was the Son of Man, like he claimed to be, then the Pharisees were going to lose some of their power and some of their followers, because they were like the top dogs. They were in charge. They were running things, and they didn't want to lose that power. So they're freaking out, and they're like, oh my gosh. And then the guy is just like, listen, I really don't know what else to tell you. You've asked me the same questions over and over again. You brought my parents in here. I got nothing. I got nothing for you. And the Pharisees are they're over it. They're done. They don't want to deal with this conversation anymore. So they say that that enough is enough. And they're like, you must be a disciple of Jesus, but we're not. We're disciples of Moses, because we know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't know where Jesus came from. Because the Jewish people followed Moses back then. They followed the law of Moses. And when Moses brought the Israelites out of Egypt when they were slaves, he was the one that was talking to God and made all these things happen. And that's kind of who the Jewish people followed, because they knew that God was talking to him. And now Jesus is on the scene, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Things are getting a little different. They didn't like it. They did not want to have to deal with this change. So the man stands up for Jesus finally, and he's like, listen, God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to people who worship him, and they follow him, and they do what he says. And the fact that nobody's ever been able to heal a blind man before, but now I can see and I was a blind man, lets me know this man must be from God. And the Pharisees lost it. They were like, get out. You can't be in here anymore. So they kicked them out of the synagogue, which was their church. And Jesus finds out about all this. So Jesus goes to the blind man, and he's like, hey, and the blind man doesn't know this is Jesus, because remember, he was blind. And so Jesus is talking to him, and he's like, hey, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the blind man is like, I mean, I want to, but I don't know who he is. And Jesus is like, it's me, your boy. And he's like, yes, I want to believe in you. So he starts to worship him, and now he's a follower of Jesus. And his life is completely changed from that point on. He started out as a baby who had never seen anything, and then he goes through all of this and now he can see. Like, that is major. And he was just so excited. And that's the type of excitement that we as Christians are able to experience. We're able to see God's power displayed through us, just like God's power was displayed through Jesus, because we love him and he wants to show people who he is. Now, from this story, there are 3 main points that I want us to make sure that we know, okay? Number 1, God is in control at all times. When we see others going through things that don't seem good, we shouldn't automatically think that they did something to deserve it. You know, when this man was born blind, I'm sure his parents were like devastated, because they were just like, oh my gosh, this is our baby and he's never going to be able to play sports or run around with other kids. He's never going to be able to draw anything. Like, I'm sure they were really upset, but they had to learn how to have faith in God. And when you have faith in God, that means that you trust him, right? Faith means that you trust, that you believe. So they had to have faith that God was in control of their son's life and that everything would be okay. And that's the same thing that we have to remember. When things happen that might not seem the greatest, we just have to remember God is in control and trust him and wait it out, because eventually what he is trying to do through us is going to come out, just like with the blind man. Number 2, the second thing I want us to remember is, when God tells you to do something, make sure you do it when he asks. Because if Jesus didn't stop to heal the blind man would have never been able to see. And if the blind man didn't listen to Jesus and go wash his eyes off, the miracle would have never happened. And that's the same thing for us. When Jesus tells us to do something, there's a reason behind it, even if we don't understand. I'm pretty sure the blind man did not understand why there was spit mud on his eyes. He also probably didn't understand why he had to go to that specific pool to wash his eyes. But he listened, he obeyed, and he got his miracle. So sometimes God will tell us things that, don't really make very much sense. But if we just trust him and do it, what he's trying to accomplish from our lives will happen. And number 3, we have to remember to focus on what is important. The Pharisees in our story wanted to try and focus on figuring out where Jesus came from, instead of focusing on the fact that God displayed his power. That's what was important, that God was there with them. But they were like, oh, whatever. We just want to figure out this Jesus guy out, because I don't know. I don't like it. So in our lives, we have to remember God is in control. Do what God asks us to do when he asks us to do it. And number 3, always remember to focus on what's important. And sometimes we'll have to pray and ask God, like, what do you want me to focus on right now? And he'll tell you. You just have to take the time to listen, which is kind of hard. Sometimes we don't like to do that. So those are our 3 main points for today. I hope you got a lot out of this lesson, and I will see you next time.